You were never just skin and thoughts. You were stitched from stars, sculpted from frequencies, and set adrift in a world that made you forget. But the body remembers what the mind forgets, especially the center of your chest. That quiet point between breath and heartbeat. Have you ever felt it ache when you were never touched? Have you ever placed your palm there in silence and felt something tremble under your skin? That is not muscle, that is memory, and memory is magnetic. Long before you had a name, that point pulsed with the same rhythm as the sun. Before you learned to speak, it whispered with the voices of your ancestors. There is a door there, one that doesn't open with keys, but with attention, and no one told you. You were taught to chase light in the sky, but never to feel the sun glowing inside your chest. You were taught how to dress, how to act, how to be admired. But no one taught you how to remember who you are. That sacred point. It's not just where love lives, it's where the entire universe once touched you and left you marked. And now it calls again. Not loudly, not with words, but with a hum. A vibration that grows when you finally stop and listen. So, if something ancient inside you has begun to stir, if your breath feels different now than it did before these words, then trust that you didn't find this video. It found you. Follow this thread before it fades again. Subscribe, not because you're curious. Subscribe because somehow you remember. Long before your name was carved into time, your body was already whispering secrets to the stars. The ancient ones knew it. They didn't need machines to measure truth. They listened to rivers, watched how fire moved, and felt the sky echo inside their breath. To them, your chest was never just bone and blood. It was a sacred mirror, reflecting both heaven and soul. In the temples of Kemet, what we now call ancient Egypt, they believed your heart held your true name, and after death it would be weighed against a feather. Not your mind, not your deeds, your heart. Taoist mystics mapped invisible rivers of energy that flowed through the body. They called them meridians. And where did the greatest river meet? At the center of the chest, the bridge between breath and being. Hermetic scribes whispered a law, as above, so within, which means the stars are not far, they are folded into the sacred space behind your ribs. This is why some people tremble in music, why certain chants or sounds can make the chest vibrate like an ancient gong, because the body isn't reacting, it's remembering. The chest holds not just your lungs, but your resonance. It is where grief pools quietly, where joy bursts unannounced, where the soul first sings before the mouth ever learns how. Look closely. Every culture had a gesture, a hand over the chest, in prayer, in grief, in awe. They weren't performing, they were activating. Because this place, this one delicate point on your body, is a bridge between the visible and the invisible, between the self you were taught to be and the self you were born as. Most people never touch it consciously, and yet it's the one place the divine has always been knocking. And when that knock goes unheard for too long, something breaks. Not loudly, but subtly, like a light dimming from within. Next section flows into how this disconnection happened. The world didn't steal your truth. It simply made too much noise for you to hear it. As you grew, layer by layer, the sacred was silenced. Not violently, but subtly. In schools that taught facts, but not feeling. In systems that measured your worth in numbers, not resonance. In moments when your heart cracked and no one noticed. So you did what the world taught you to do. You covered the ache. You called it growing up. You wore smiles like armor and dreams like currency. And that soft point in your chest, it dimmed. not because it was broken, but because it was buried. You were taught that strength means silence, that logic is superior to longing, that the body is a machine, not a memory. But the heart never agreed. It pulsed its ancient rhythm anyway. It sent tremors through your chest when you heard that one song, or smelled something that reminded you of a home you never knew. It wept in secret, even when your face stayed dry. Mystics once said, "Forgetfulness is the greatest sin." Not because it's wrong, but because it separates you from the mirror within. The mirror we gaze into now is not made of glass, but belief. And belief can be bent. It can be molded into a mask so perfect you begin to think it's your face. And yet, there are moments, quiet, irrational ones, where you touch your chest without thinking, in prayer, in fear, in awe, as if something inside still knows where to knock. That's not accident. That's memory leaking through the cracks. You weren't born numb. You were trained into forgetting. And now, the training is wearing off. The illusion isn't collapsing all at once, but it's cracking. And through that crack, something begins to hum again. They told you your mind was the master, but what if your mind was only an echo? And the true voice lives deep in your chest? For centuries, sages, shamans, and monks have meditated with their palms pressed lightly against this very point, right in the center of the chest, slightly above the heart. Why? Because this space holds the gateway to the heart-brain, a connection far more powerful than science was ever willing to admit. The heart is not just a muscle. Modern science has finally caught up with what ancient mystics always knew. The heart is not just pumping blood, it's transmitting wisdom. It sends more signals to the brain than the brain sends to it. Let that settle. You're here. Heart teaches your brain how to respond, not the other way around. When you're centered in the chest, when you breathe into this sacred point, you're not just calming yourself. You're syncing with your original blueprint, a state known as heart-brain coherence. In this state, everything aligns. Your breath, your thoughts, your emotional frequency, your access to inner knowing, the vagus key. Running like a river through this point is the vagus nerve, the soul thread that touches almost every major organ in your body. When you gently press or touch the center of your chest, you're not just performing a ritual, you're sending a ripple through the nervous system of your soul. The result? A profound calm, a drop in stress hormones, a deepening of breath, a loosening of timelines. Tuning into the earth, there is a frequency the earth hums at. It's called the Schumann resonance, roughly 7.83 Hz. It just so happens that this same frequency occurs when the brain is in a deep, meditative state, or when the heart and brain are in harmony. Coincidence? No, it's a design. Touching this sacred chest point isn't just a personal practice, it's a way of syncing yourself with the cosmic rhythm of Earth itself. The biofield is real. The heart emits an electromagnetic field 60 times stronger than the brain. This isn't symbolic, this is measurable. This field expands beyond your skin into the space around you, and it responds to your emotional state. Touching the chest, breathing with intention, activates this field. People feel it, animals sense it, and the universe begins to reflect it. So when you touch this point, with silence, with intention, with presence, you're not raising your vibration through effort. You're remembering it. You're not calling for healing. You're retuning yourself back to the original song you were always meant to sing. In the silent chambers of ancient temples, beneath walls covered in symbols and echoes of prayers, one truth pulsed louder than the rest, that the human body itself was a sacred map, not a metaphor, not an idea, but a living architecture, a temple of divine resonance. This sacred point on your chest, the place your fingers almost instinctively press when overwhelmed by love, truth, or pain, is not a modern discovery. It has always been known, preserved, whispered, hidden in the oldest codices, the most guarded rites, the geometry of temples, and the gaze of statues staring across centuries. The Egyptians, those master architects of mystery, encoded this point in the Jed pillar, a symbol not just of stability, but of the awakened spine rising toward the heart. The Jed wasn't merely about the base of the spine, it was a ladder for energy. And the destination? Always the chest, the heart, the inner throne of the divine. Move eastward to the yogic traditions of India, and this sacred center reveals its Sanskrit name, Anahata, the unstruck sound. This chakra, nestled in the very same place on the chest, is said to be the bridge between the earthly and the spiritual. It is neither desire nor detachment. It is balance. The energy here vibrates in the color green, the hue of forests, healing and rebirth. When activated, Anahata doesn't just awaken love, it awakens universal memory. In Christian mysticism, long before the scriptures were reworded and diluted, the images said it all. Look closely at the old icons of Christ. His hand points to a burning heart in the middle of his chest, crowned with thorns, radiating divine light. That isn't poetry. It's instruction. It's reminder. The mystics who painted these were not just artists. They were encoding what was almost lost. Travel even further into the forests of Central America, and you'll hear Mayan shamans speaking of a glowing orb inside the chest. They say when you close your eyes and place your hand there, you can speak to your ancestors. Indigenous African rituals call for pressing sacred stones to the breastbone to connect with ancestral lines. Aboriginal elders speak of the dreaming chest, a place where visions begin. Why would so many cultures across space and time point to the same place on the human body? Because this point was never physical alone. It was a spiritual gateway, a way to feel without touching, to know without speaking, to heal without medicine. Mystics knew that when this point is touched with intention, it doesn't awaken the heart, it awakens the heavens. Ancient temples weren't random stone marvels. Their geometry was sacred. The proportions mirrored the human form. The central sanctum, the place where the deity sat, was aligned with the human chest when scaled. It is no accident. It was a message. You are the temple. Your chest is the sanctum. They left clues, symbols, statues with their palms over their chest, paintings, songs, all whispering, touch here and remember. And just like that, when your fingers press softly to that point today, you're not just practicing spirituality, you're continuing a legacy that refused to die. There is something ancient that happens the moment your fingers press against that sacred point on your chest. The skin may feel smooth, the motion may seem simple, but underneath, something stirs, something not taught in books or born from thought. Because touch, true, conscious touch, is alchemy. In ancient teachings, every part of the body was believed to hold memory. Not the kind of memory stored in the mind, but something deeper, soul memory. Pressing on this central point was never about physical pressure, it was about permission to unlock the sealed door. And behind that door, vibration, frequency, light. The heart center, according to the mystics, is not just a chakra or organ, it is a cosmic transmitter. When touched with awareness, it begins to hum, not metaphorically but literally. Subtle vibrations ripple out through the nervous system, echoing through the fascia, down the spine, into the organs, and up toward the brain. This is why ancient practitioners, from Sufi dervishes to Taoist monks, placed such importance on the gesture of hand to chest. It wasn't symbolic, it was science, hidden in spirit. By applying pressure here, they weren't just calming the body, they were tuning the soul. Imagine the chest point like a sealed crystal, dormant until contact. The moment you press, heat flows, breath deepens, attention gathers, and slowly it begins. Forgotten emotions rise to the surface. Buried memories start to flicker. Visions, sometimes yours, sometimes ancestral, reappear like echoes in a cave. But it goes further. When this point is stimulated with reverence, dormant energy trapped in the base of the spine begins to ascend. The serpent wakes, the spine becomes the flute, and the breath, the sacred wind, plays the tune of remembrance. Some ancient yogis spoke of this as the inner fire. Alchemists of the Nile called it sekhem. Chinese sages whispered of qi. No matter the name, it always began with awakening the center. Modern science, still catching up, now confirms the heart emits the strongest electromagnetic field in the human body, and it expands up to 10 feet outside of you. When activated, this field becomes coherent, meaning it can communicate with other hearts, with nature, even with intention itself. Touch your chest with sacred presence, and that field begins to pulse differently. It begins to speak the language of the soul. This is not a gesture of self-comfort. This is an ancient command to awaken, to remember what has been buried beneath distraction, need, we see, and modern forgetting. Because the truth is, you've always known. In moments of deep love, heartbreak, awe, or loss, your hand knew where to go. It wasn't habit, it wasn't random. It was soul memory reactivating itself. And in that moment, you weren't just touching your heart, you were touching eternity. There comes a moment in every seeker's journey when the silence becomes louder than the noise, when the world outside no longer holds the answers, when no book, no sermon, no voice can speak to the ache that stirs within. It is in that moment, soft, still, sacred, that the soul remembers what the mind forgot. Your body was never just flesh, it was a temple, and that gesture, the simple act of touching your chest, was never random. It was a prayer without words, a doorway without keys, a technology without wires. This gesture has lived in the background of your life, waiting through the heartbreaks, through the moments you couldn't speak your truth, through the nights you collapsed into the dark, hands trembling, breath shallow, soul cracked open. Even then, especially then, your hand would rise. You'd press it against your heart without knowing why. And that point, beneath skin and story, would listen. It always listened. Because it holds the code. A code that predates language. A map encoded in your energy long before your name was spoken. A signal that echoes back to every ancestor who stood under stars, who sang to the wind, who touched their chest and whispered to the divine. And now, it's your turn. Not because you've earned it, not because you must fix yourself, but because you're remembering. You're remembering that your soul is not asleep, that your body is not separate from your spirit, that you are not just a seeker of the light, you are the light, hidden beneath layers of forgetting. So take a breath. Place your hand on your chair. So not as a routine, but as a return, let your fingers remember what your words cannot say. This is not about a spiritual trend. This is not about doing it right. It's about doing it real. When you rise in the morning, touch your heart. When you feel overwhelmed, touch your heart. When you look at the stars and wonder why you're here, touch your heart. And with that touch, say nothing, feel everything, and allow the memory to return. Because you don't need a temple. You don't need a guru. You don't need permission. You are the portal. The moment your hand meets that sacred space, the spine aligns, the breath softens, the energy rises, and slowly, gently, powerfully, you begin to remember that you were always more than bones and breath, that you were always the mystery you were trying to find. So return to that point. Return to your own sacred center. And when the world forgets who you are, you won't. You'll know. You'll feel it. And in that moment, the gesture will no longer be forgotten. It will be yours again. Always was. Always will be. If this reminder brought you closer to yourself, let it stay with you. Let your hand return to your heart again and again and again. Follow the Spine Gospel for more sacred awakenings like this one. Your journey is only just beginning.